We're very excited to be joined by Harriet Meyer, an award-winning personal finance editor, journalist and copywriter with over 20 years' experience across national newspapers, magazines and websites. Harriet still writes regularly, and if you haven't read her series of how AI can help you with various aspects of your life on The Observer, I recommend you do so. It's brilliant. But she's also pivoted her career to become an AI trainer for journalists, content teams and PR professionals. And that's the subject we're going to be discussing today, how AI is changing journalism. Welcome to the Digital PR Podcast, Harriet. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to be able to chat to you. Thought it might be a good opener question to basically ask, not to labour the point, but you've been a journalist for a while, so you've probably seen a lot how things have changed. We're now in this age of AI. What have you seen that's changed the most from a journalist perspective around how stories get commissioned, produced, distributed? What are the big changes?
Honestly, commissioning hasn't changed as much as people think. I think we're all rushing to try and catch up with where AI is now, and we're a long way from doing that, to be honest. If you're a trusted journalist, or if you're receiving briefs and commissions, they're pretty much standard as they used to be, and often you'll just receive a line from an editor if you've worked with them for a while. It's not, the commissioning process isn't some lengthy thing. But where AI, I think, is changing things is more inside the workflow. So it's really about, it's becoming a super powerful research and analysis partner. So journalists can interrogate far more material, far more quickly, and that genuinely helps with investigative and analytical work. But as I said, newsrooms are still in the early stages of using this well, largely because editorial teams are under enormous pressure and behaviour change takes a lot longer than switching a tool on. But for some actual examples, the Financial Times scraped Russian adoption websites to help identify children abducted during the invasion of Ukraine, and used image matching software to compare tens of thousands of faces against Ukrainian government records. That's kind of like a really nitty-gritty use of AI. And journalists have used ChatGPT to classify tens of thousands of federal complaints against Tesla workers. And it's really in those sorts of things that I'm hearing more work being done in journalism around AI. And of course, there's the ability to distribute stories in different ways. So in more direct audience relationships and more direct to using social media, TikTok, the creator economy is a big threat to media as well. And the merging of those worlds and the distribution of stories is changing as well, I would say. But we're still, even though we're years on, more than 3 years since ChatGPT launched, we're still very early doors.
Coming back to that point, because I think, I know we're very fascinated by your career arc, Harriet, in that you seem to spot that generative AI was going to be a big deal for journalism and the media industry kind of ahead of a lot of people. How did you do that? What was the penny dropping moment when you realised it was going to be a big thing rather than just another fad?
Yeah, I think that is because I've been around for quite a long time. So I started in papers when it was all about the paper, and I started at the Telegraph, and I was writing several features a week, and the online version of the paper was somewhere in a back cupboard somewhere, and really not considered important, and not the real journalists. And then I saw the digital revolution and how that transformed and put pressure on media, and I've seen how the industry's changed and the demands on journalism and journalists and the lack of time that we all have, and how much pressure there is to produce more and more stories. And then when ChatGPT landed, at the end of 2022, I was in an editorial role and part-time editorial role, and was freelancing as well and doing lots of different work. And I was sort of getting a little bit itchy feet in terms of just wanted a new topic to get into. And ChatGPT landed, and I started dabbling with a few prompts. And I saw the power of the early stage of this technology. I thought, my God, this is the first version. It's spitting out story ideas. It's basically doing a rather crappy version of what we do. And actually, then I thought, well, I'm going to get ahead of this. This is going to be bigger than the digital revolution. It's going to fundamentally change the way that we work and the way that we live. And so I started reading everything and learning as much as I could, very early stages, and since then, I've kind of spent hours a day and listened to thousands of hours of podcasts and all sorts. And I just became fascinated. It was just a new topic that I found really interesting and just learned as much as I could and experimented. And it just went from there. And I think that once you start to do that, you get a real understanding of the power of these tools and how they could potentially change things in media.
How do you feel about it though? Because what I'm interested to know is that you were a very early adopter, but you seem incredibly positive about AI in so many ways. And I saw you talk at a conference last year, and you were very eloquent and informed. And do you feel positive about the direction of travel, or are there still kind of fears or anxieties around it? Because it's so mind-blowing what has happened, what is happening.
Well, I'm generally positive, but I'm also naturally skeptical, which sounds odd, but actually I'm naturally skeptical. I mean, I've been a journalist for decades. I pick into things that I am also terrified. Like it's not that I'm just approaching AI with relentless positivity at all. I feel very conflicted about it. I mean, the tech giants, I wouldn't trust them an inch. What I do believe is that there are potentially phenomenal uses of this technology which can improve our lives, and that there is a big focus on the negative sides of AI, particularly in media. And understandably, people are very fearful, very threatened by this tech that could, replace our jobs and make us redundant effectively as humans. But I also think it's so transformative and it's very exciting at the same time. So it's really, it's not black or white. There's a real grey area with AI, and where I try to approach it from is a very grounded perspective. So yes, I am. It's exciting being immersed in this tech and how and experimenting and working out how it can transform workflows. But at the same time, I am very skeptical of the tech giants, and I do believe that that is morally wrong. A lot of what's going on, the scraping of data and stuff, is terrible, and I really empathise as well with where journalists and PRs and creatives are sat with it, and I think that's where I saw that I could try and bridge that gap between the old and the new worlds, and because I felt like because there is so much fear around it and anger as well. So it's trying to actually make people in this process of doing the AI training that I'm doing is seeing the mindset change, because it is a mindset shift, and it's helping people overcome that so they can at least find their place in what comes next.
You mentioned how you do training, and so some of that is training PRs in how to work with journalists, understand newsrooms, things like that. I guess taking AI slightly out of it, is there anything just in general that you feel like PRs still misunderstand about how journalism works?
I know loads of great PRs, and I've friends with lots of PRs who have a very clear understanding of how journalists works. But I think the biggest misunderstanding is probably quite how little time journalists have in terms of, the pressure has increased. So I've seen how much the pressure has increased over even recent years. And because of that, journalists are much more reactive, I think, than sometimes people realise. In terms of formulaic pitching isn't going to cut it anymore. It has to be, relevant. It has to be really speedy. There has to be the trust there more than ever. And sort of, the availability issue is you have to be really reactive, more so than ever, is that if a PR says, I've got a case study, that case study has to be available to speak ideally within, 24 hours. It's not that it's just getting faster. And I think this is where, if used strategically, coming back to AI, you can slot it into the workflows to actually help journalists, but you have to know how to use it well.
You obviously train newsrooms and journalists on kind of AI and how to use it, and PR professionals likewise. In your opinion, where is it kind of most useful in PR and journalism, AI that is, like workflows, that kind of thing, and where is it not being used well? Where is it mostly noise? And obviously this is a snapshot in time, Harriet, because it's going to change.
Yes,
but
exactly.
For right now, where is it most useful?
Well, there's a hell of a lot of noise around it, and to be honest, we're now in 2026, and it's got worse, I think. And I would say most people can ignore most of the noise, but it can genuinely support human thinking, strategy, and things like holding context. I think there's something in the kind of AI lingo. They've talked about moving from prompt engineering to context engineering, which really just means, rather than using AI like Google or something like that, you're basically, rather than just giving it a prompt and hoping for the best, you are giving it as much context, so background information, data as possible. Where I see the power of AI is its ability to analyze huge volumes of information, spot patterns. I mean, fundamentally, we're talking about machines here and helping teams think more strategically and it can alongside streamlining workflows and boosting productivity, which of course is shouted about so much, and yes, it can do that, but it can also boost innovation and strategy and what teams can actually produce, because humans are actually quite bad at holding tons of background detail at once, and AI isn't, and that's really where it adds value. But in terms of where there's lots of noise and is like the real end-to-end, I would say, agentic workflows, and all these, you go on LinkedIn, you see people shouting about massive end-to-end. If you're not, doing 3 agentic deep research queries before breakfast, then you're going to be unemployed. All these sorts of things that people are shouting about at the moment. And that's where I feel like the noise isn't helpful. And actually, more often than not, you can build agents and they can be really helpful for those repetitive tasks, but more often than not, particularly in the media, it's more nuanced. There's more, like, every piece of work might be slightly different, but it can hold the context of, say, that client or that campaign in a way that we just can't.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that what you really need to start out on this journey is just purely a ChatGPT paid for license, for example, rather than, I think what I often see is, there's various different tools which are obviously AI powered. To my knowledge, it seems like, a wrapper for actually what ChatGPT can do, but it just does one thing specifically. Is your advice to or do you feel it's actually ChatGPT can suffice in so many different ways? Or actually, is there lots of benefits to having various different tools that do various different specific things using AI?
I think tool overwhelm is a big thing. I mean, I'm on AI WhatsApp groups and all sorts of things now, and somebody texted me about, have you heard about this new tool? It's being shouted about in all the newsletters. I'm like, no, I haven't got to that newsletter yet. And I'm going to ignore that for right now, because actually, like you just said, what you need to start off with is I would say a paid account, because fundamentally, if you're using a free account, you're paying with your data. And it's not, you want to get to grip, and they have more features. You can use them more heavily if you're in a paid account. So the 4 big large language models, there's ChatGPT, there's Claude, there's Gemini, there's Copilot. Those are your 4 biggies, and just pick one. And it might be the one that your office currently, you're meant to be using, say, Copilot or ChatGPT. Quite a lot of teams I'm seeing might have their own versions of either ChatGPT or Copilot or both or something like that, or just Gemini, and then really get to grips with it, because the strategies and the techniques that I train teams in apply across all the models, but you have to learn to use them well. The risk is, if you're jumping around and you're trying to follow the noise and the hype, and you're thinking, well, I'll use this tool for this and this tool for that, and you'll just very quickly make more work for yourself. I mean, things like, a really good AI note taker, that's incredibly valuable. 1 large language model or 2, I flit with which one. I have paid versions of all of them, and I train teams in all of them, but I will, at the moment, I'm really loving Claude, and I use ChatGPT very heavily as well. And I dip in a Gemini workspace it's linked to all my workspace. So I'm obviously in a specialized area, but I would definitely say get to grips with one, learn the techniques, and you'll be really well placed for what comes next.
That's reassuring to know, because I think both of us have commented on feeling overwhelmed, and even just flicking onto LinkedIn, it's like, how on earth can you possibly keep up with the...
Well, you can't. Nobody can.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. That's a clear message for the listeners.
Anybody, and everybody in the AI space does exactly the same thing, which is that even the people making these models, and nobody is keeping up fully with AI. It's just not possible. And you have to... That's why, I mean, my training has slightly evolved in that, initially I was obviously training people in the basics, but now it's more of a strategic approach and a mindset shifting approach to actually strip it back. What do you need to know? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? How can AI help you? What are your workflows? How can they be reimagined? Like just take it down to your use case. Because if you try to keep up with, LinkedIn overwhelm and all the different tool releases and the model updates, you very quickly just drown in that. And it's not actually very helpful.
Yeah. Oh, I feel very reassured. Very reassured, Harriet.
The Digital PR podcast is brought to you by Coverage Book, the tool that is helping thousands of PR teams around the world spend less time and effort on reporting so they can put their energy back into the more important parts of PR. Many people come for the metrics, but then they stay for our estimated coverage views figures. That's right, we predict how many people may see your article or social post. We don't just tell you the total amount of people that happen to go to a publisher site or an influencer's feed. We really are about helping PR professionals be taken seriously at the important time of measuring success. So why don't you give it a try? Test the metrics and see how much time your team can save. Go to coveragebook.com for your free trial.
Really keen to get some examples because you work with lots of PR agencies' teams. Obviously, we're not asking you to name any of them at all, but
Yeah.
what we have seen, certainly in the early days of ChatGPT AI, is that a lot of people are trying to use it for speed and efficiency, to kind of cut corners, for want of a better phrase, or to speed up some of their workflows, which is valid, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But are there kind of better examples, not just for speed and efficiency, that you have of like how agencies are actually using it to properly enhance their work?
Yeah. So it's specific but general and phenomenally powerful. It's just using things like ChatGPT projects for campaign planning. But they have to be, and this is where the training comes in, they have to be set up correctly with the right knowledge files in the right format, and the settings in the project have to be set correctly so that they work, and the model has to be trained and on that specific client. And then when it's got the background information, that's when they can be so powerful in enhancing what you can do as a team. And that's where I see, and sort of setting up either project campaigns or client to bases for your team that you can share, that you can innovate with. Or also things like just you mentioned just the simple stuff, but actually the repetitive tasks, but even things like, setting up really effective scheduled tasks in like Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini. You can do that in all of them. And these just mean that you'll get an email to your inbox, say, with an update on a story or a journalist or something that you're following, and you can stack them so they can really enhance. Like, it's not like a Google RSS feed or something like that. It's more powerful than that if you think about it more strategically as to how is this actually going to enhance what you do. So yeah, there are lots of little ways that AI can shave corners and help productivity, but actually it can also really boost enhance what people can do. And things like setting up personas for like GPTs or gems or whatever model you're using in the different versions, you can set them up to be something like a skeptical editor or like a client persona, and then have it push back and improve on what your ideas are and so you're kind of working with AI as a thought partner and to push you out of your comfort zone, and it's like having you have to sort of think of it as another team member that kind of knows everything and nothing. So you have to really guide it, but point it at the right knowledge, and it suddenly becomes very powerful.
This is something that I've had to get used to. Is like we use a lot of custom GPTs, right, at work, and yeah, as you say, setting it up with a certain persona or giving it like a clear brief, like you are a client or you are a journalist, like give us honest feedback on this pitch, this idea. And it's weird when it comes back. It's quite scathing. I find that quite difficult to deal with. It's like,
well, a lot of people complain that AI is too sycophantic. So at least you're pushing it out of that, because that is one of the most irritating things about it. You have to get it out of that.
That's true.
Are there things actually, like when you're going in and working with a PR agency, your first few things that you might kind of set up with them? I know you said obviously you'll look at their particular use cases, but maybe it is that trying to remove the sycophancy thing, which I believe you can do by kind of, there's a general area where you can say, look, can you just be a bit more skeptical or things like that? Are there certain things where you're like, these are good kind of first things that you would do with a PR team?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to get the foundations right. And it depends where they're at, but you have to set up whatever model you're using as a team correctly before you can do anything else. So it would be just things like, setting your custom instructions, using your settings in whatever model you're using effectively, and thinking about the structure of, if you've using a prompt bank or something like that, like thinking of the structure of those use cases, thinking about I know that prompting is sort of becoming, you can use AI to help improve your prompts, but you still have to know the foundations of what actually makes a good prompt and why. And also just things like how AI works. I mean, people think they understand how AI works, but you really do need to know the foundational side of things before you move on to the really streamlined use cases, because that's where it becomes really powerful. But if you don't have the first steps in place, you're not going to get to the next part. So I would walk through a team, here's ChatGPT, say, for example, what are the different models? What do they mean? What are the settings? What are the different features in ChatGPT? What do they mean for your team? What do they mean for PR? Like, all those sorts of things, so people can have more of an understanding. And I'm always surprised at how that really does help with the process of then applying AI effectively.
I love that. I agree with everything you've said, but particularly on not now. I'm the sycophant. Look at me. I'm very ChatGPT.
Yeah, all right, ChatGPT.
But particularly what you said about learning how it works, because I found that to be the most useful thing. Like when it comes to us and what we do in terms of AI, yes, we're using it to be more efficient in our work, but also we're advising clients on how to appear better in ChatGPT and all every AI kind of model. And actually, having at least some basic understanding about how it works is really helpful, because I think I was one of those people, kind of, it would give me an answer and I'd be like, why have you given me this answer? Expecting it to answer like it's a coherent human being, when actually there's reasons why that is not useful. And we, on a previous podcast, someone was talking about how ChatGPT is really rubbish at word count and things like. There's things where like you would think that this is such a basic thing, but for reasons ChatGPT isn't good at that kind of stuff, and it's knowing what it's good at and what it's not good at and why that might be is really, I find it very interesting and helpful. So I can see that's a really good place to start with teams.
Like it's a sophisticated pattern predicting machine. It's technology, and it thinks why you need to sort of give it, to get it to work well, why you need to set up in certain ways and give it the context and structure your prompts and structure instructions, do everything right for the AI, is because it breaks it. The way that it will process that information is different to us. So we're not, people talk about chatbots and having a chat with ChatGPT and stuff, but you're not really having a conversation. It's pulling from its vast machine brain to spit out something it thinks sounds right from its data. It doesn't fundamentally know necessarily the answer unless you guide it in the right way.
Let's scare ourselves a bit, Harriet. Let's scare ourselves. So we've talked a lot about how it works and some of the good use cases of it. What are the biggest risks with AI use amongst PR teams, editorial teams, if there aren't proper kind of rules or guardrails in place? What are the biggest risks you see?
Yeah, well, you would have seen all the fake stories and fake experts. All these, I think you had Rob Waugh actually, who's a fantastic journalist. Yeah, a fantastic journalist. He's done loads of work around this, ongoing, and I think there's risks of, like you just been saying about, if you don't understand how AI works, then you're not going to understand the risks of it. So it's the trust. You've got to be really careful of trusting AI without using it effectively. So, and over reliance, those sorts of things, and in that it can sound confidently brilliant and very polished. We've seen lots of polished AI copy, but even when it's very wrong, so it's really used badly. It can really add a lot of. It can completely, wreck trust in an instant, either with your audience or with your clients. As a PR agency, you've got to be really careful. So, and this is where, human judgment, editorial judgment has never been more important. And actually, the marrying of human expertise in PR media world with confident AI responsible use is extremely powerful. And that's where I see the gains. But where I see the real risks is when either to be like, you've got to be careful. I understand you've got to be careful with like junior team members, like really making sure they're setting those guardrails in place, that they're using it. The guidelines are there that they can use it in a way that they know is okay. But yeah, you've got to be careful of the trust in the AI output.
Yeah, it's a reassuring but kind of sobering answer, I suppose, because we do have to be wary of this. And the one thing that keeps playing on my mind is the idea that, we work in PR, you come from a journalist background, is politicians and politics and things like that. And I've often thought, like, are we going to get to a world where like politicians are just sort of using ChatGPT to set policy and, almost ask like, oh, should I do this? Like, what are the scenarios? That's the kind of thing that makes me, when you go beyond just news and media, I don't know how I feel about that. Quite scared. It
is scary. And I mean, regulation just isn't in place, and it's frightening that the tech is just evolving so fast. I know it's cliche to say it, but it is moving at breakneck speed, and we are just not keeping up. And meanwhile, of course, the governments are just all in on AI.
Yeah.
So who knows what? I think there will be a correction. I think there will be something, maybe even this year. I think there will be a pushback. I'm kind of waiting for this to happen, a bigger pushback on. But again, it's a bit like the internet. Like, there was. I know it's different technology, but there will always be a pushback. But it doesn't mean that the change isn't going. It will still fundamentally change everything.
Yeah. In terms of who's there to kind of decide what responsible use is. So whether you're a politician or whether you're in a PR team or you're a journalist working in a newsroom, so whose responsibility do you think that is to define what kind of responsible use of AI is? Because I guess not the most senior person in the room might not necessarily be the person who knows the most about AI. No. So it's opens up an interesting question.
Yes. Well, I think there needs to be guidance in place for not using sensitive information, not using anything like that in terms of putting confidential information into these particularly free models or anything like that. But I do think it's tricky, but essentially responsibility does sort of sit with the user, because you can't really do it any other way. If you think about, you can have policies for all sorts of things in place, or the guidance, but you can't control like how people are going to apply that. So I do believe that responsibility sits with the user, but that's where you need it's really a leadership issue. It's not so much a tech issue. It's a leadership issue in terms of instilling that responsibility in their team and shifting the mindset to use these tools responsibly, understanding how they work, that they are not a substitute for thinking and doing the job. And that will be, if, for example, a junior PR relied completely on AI to produce everything, and that was discovered, that needs to be made clear that is not acceptable. So it's sort of, it's a tricky one at the moment.
That's interesting, because when you get the next generation coming through in PR and journalism who are, I have 2 young children. I look at how they did. I grew up without mobile phones, for example, and the internet, which makes me sound Victorian. We had the internet, but it was in Carter Encyclopedia on a disc, that kind of thing. But like the next generation coming through, you're right, it's that leadership issue. It's like, this is how we should be using it or what the kind of parameters are, because actually a lot of junior people might go, well, I'm under pressure to deliver. I'm under pressure to deliver copy or ideas, and they might just completely default to AI. But I guess no one knows exactly what's going to happen in the next, year, 2 years, 3 years?
No, I mean, and anyone who says they do is lying, because you can't know the future. But we do know that I do think it's going to be messy before it sorts itself out, because we're in this phase of huge change. But yes, the junior issue, I think, is a real issue in terms of it's very difficult to police that. But that's where I feel like there needs to be more communication between teams. And this is something that I am talking about more with things like editorial directors, is actually the communication between like the product team and the journalist team. And there needs to be that communication between the leaders and the junior writers, because this is so huge, and actually people are just scared, like they don't know what they're meant to be doing, so they just don't. So it's trying to move people to that place where they're all kind of learning together.
I'm just quite curious to get your insights into what it's like for that junior journalist working at a newspaper or online or wherever they are. What often is the rules around using AI? Like, is it don't use it at all for your writing? Is it it's okay for research, but I don't want to see anything that sounds cliche in ChatGPT? You know, what are you finding are the parameters of where they can and can't use AI?
Generally, not for writing, not for producing copy. Well, again, it's really different. I'm just thinking of a local news agency who is using AI because actually for local news, it's been brilliant, because junior reporters, there's so much pressure on local news to produce, to how do they report everything in the local community. So they are producing AI tools that can generate first drafts en masse and producing tens of thousands more stories than they could before. So it depends, but generally in bigger news, in the biggest publishers, I would say it's research. They're encouraged to use it, although they're still, I feel like journalists are still very much at early stages because they are so busy, and actually it's a fundamentally different way of working. But it's definitely research, analysing data, do all that, like speed up your workflow, but then write the piece yourself. And yeah, it might be used the other end. It sort of slots in at the beginning and the end of the process. Like it's, embedded in CMSs and stuff, like helping with headline generation and those sorts of things.
Let's talk about disclosure as well. We've asked this of a couple of our guests now. It'd be really interesting to get your take on it. So should PR people be saying to journalists when AI has been used, whether that's creating a pitch, a press release, or kind of any supporting materials?
I think everyone's using AI in some respect now. So unless it's sort of, like, the thing is you can tell when a press release, I mean, certainly I can tell because I've seen enough AI copy to know, and we've seen them doing rounds on LinkedIn, haven't we? This word means it's AI. But if you effectively, you shouldn't be using AI to entirely just churn out press releases. If you want journalists to pick up the story, it can be used to kind of, general announcements, formulaic stuff. That's fine. And then I don't think it needs to be disclosed because it's just kind of a formulaic approach, and anything repetitive, that's fine. But for things like story packages, if you used AI to help with a certain, say, you'd hope the PR would check everything that they're sending you. So no, not really, unless you hope that would have all been checked and it would all be accurate. I mean, I've heard horror stories about, case studies that didn't exist, and then the journalist writes up the whole story. And I mean, it just, makes, we
can see that visually, how crestfallen you are by that.
Yeah, well, that's the terrifying bit. As I really do feel for like particularly freelancers and stuff who don't have the support of necessarily an in-house team who can help them with this stuff. But trying to fact check all this stuff, you just if you're using AI as a PR, just make sure you're fact checking everything's still really good quality, that you're thinking about what's really going to land with that particular journalist and their readership, and then that's fine.
That's fair enough. in terms of disclosure from a journalism side, I think you referenced the local newspaper, and I think I know the one that you're referencing because I remember seeing it kind of, it says like this article is AI assisted or some sort of phrase like that. Do you also think that that it's important in journalism to say when something has been helped with AI in terms of the writing of it, perhaps not the research, but when it comes to the writing?
So the national publishers are not disclosing that they are using AI in articles or anything like that because they are very much, everything written and produced is human made. So, whether it's the Observer or the Times or whatever, they're not going to be writing anything that isn't authentically human written and produced. But where AI might be helping is, like you say, in the research process. So that's not really happening. It's more that disclosure is happening where, like you've just mentioned, the local news or like smaller agencies, or then it is you will see articles that say that they are AI assisted, and obviously if an image or an infographic is produced, which they're really good quality now. Again, nationals are not doing that, but well, not yet. But there are other local or magazines or some online publishers who are.
I'm going to give you a scenario, Harriet. So imagine someone has done your training. They're an AI expert. They really understand how several or one of the LLMs works. Let's say ChatGPT. They know how to prompt amazingly, use projects, all of that kind of stuff. So they're like kind of the best in class that they can be for the moment. Where are humans still outperforming AI? Like where can AI not really touch at the moment?
I've been thinking a lot about this generally, because that's one thing I do think we need to really lean into generally is, well, the fundamentally human qualities like intuition, connection with your clients, with the journalists, reading the room, being able to kind of find that thread in a conversation in real life where, that leads to another idea or down another path. It's those things that it can't do. And I think those are going to become increasingly important. I read a phenomenal article a few days ago that was really thought-provoking. It was sort of saying things that this is going to take a long time, but the people who have the charisma and the ability to connect with other human beings, and kind of comedians and the best therapists, and those are the people who are going to really thrive in the next, because a lot of it is taking over a lot of the tasks that knowledge workers, desk workers are. So it's leaning into those skills that it can't do. And when you're a journalist or when you're a PR, one thing that you would hope you would be doing anyway, but if you're not, then do this more than ever, is put yourself in the journalist who's receiving your pitch, for example, or does it resonate with their audience? Why? What holes are they going to pick in that story? Really push yourself to think as a human, basically, and not a machine. So you're actually analysing the story from your own gut feel, because that's what I do. Whenever I've written any article, I would always sit back at the end and read it and imagine I'm the reader. What is missing? Do I understand this? Does it make sense? What would I want to know that's not in there? Or those sorts of things. And that's where I feel like AI can't quite do that.
And that's a big part of a job for
yes. Particularly in media, I would say. I mean, that's why journalists and PRs a lot of the time get into these roles, is because we're people. We like people. We like finding the threads in stories and communication. We're communicators, and we like words and writing, and we're inspired by big ideas, and those sorts of things are pretty unique, and that's where we still have a lot of value. And actually, like I said earlier, editorial judgement. AI is not walking around on the street. It's got this machine. It's pulling from everything on the internet. So those conversations that you have, with a friend over dinner or something, that AI is not taking that in, unless you're wearing some kind of wearable AI listening device.
Then you're just asking for trouble. So
yes.
Oh, that I feel like, that's we're starting to wrap up now in the podcast, and I feel like this is a really nice way to start ending it, because it's very easy to just get bogged down in the negatives of the effects of AI and things like that. And it's nice to know that there's a whole ream of things that humans can still do a lot better. For our last question, and it's a bit of a classic last question, it is around what you think AI will do and what shifts we'll see in the next kind of year and a half, maybe specifically for media teams, but also if there's anything in general that you feel you want to mention, we'd be fascinated to hear.
I think it's going to take, there is actually a brilliant quote. Roy Amara, a technologist, said something like, we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short term and underestimate the effect in the long term. So it's going to take a while. And I'm still seeing, I'm training loads of teams this year, and it's very much, we're still in early stage of really understanding how we can use this. But I believe that the shift is going to be more of a mental shift. So it's going to be not so much actually just, starting to use AI, because majority of people are, some more heavily than others. Is going to be how actually we can reimagine our workflow strategies and sort of gradually start to rebuild processes again. We're a way off this, but it's going to be more like a mental mindset shift into reimagining workflows. And that's what I'm starting to help teams with now, is more the frameworks and the strategies, and how can you approach this and scale AI use throughout your team. Yeah, I think that is one thing I've consistently seen with working from teams, is that it's very much not so much the getting to grips with the tech. It's like a light bulb moment of, I'm actually thinking differently.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned earlier, just coming back to a previous point, do you think that there will be kind of legislation that's brought in by governments to sort of, I don't know, what's the way of putting it? Not to cap our AI use, but to kind of frame it in an ethical way? Because you talked earlier about, and it's something that I've read quite a lot about, is that how could you possibly keep up as a government with what the pace of change? And they clearly don't want to sort of clip the wings of the big tech companies for lots of reasons in lots of ways. But how do you see that evolving and kind of manifesting?
I'm not very optimistic about that side, to be completely honest. If you speak to people working in governments, and I've had some interesting conversations with people who these people are in charge, and they don't know much about AI at all, and they're just learning themselves like we are. So actually, it's not that I believe that regulation is going to come in anytime soon. Who knows? It's a worrying fact that governments are not in a rush to put any guardrails around this. And in terms of limiting use, I don't see that really. But I do believe, like I said, that I think we are on some sort of cusp soon of something happening with AI, where there's a pushback or there's something that will happen. Because when I think about the power of the technology out there for damage as well as potential, the upside and the downside, is there are so many risks that come with that, and there will be something that happens that makes people rein back in. Even maybe, we take our own responsibility with it, like we were saying earlier, it's like the user's responsibility. We might rein ourselves back in. So who knows? But it's going to be, I do think the coming year is going to be a bit crazy.
That's a perfect ending to the podcast. The next few years are going to be crazy. Harriet, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us all of your insights and knowledge of the kind of current landscape. It's been genuinely fascinating. How should people get in touch with you if they want to know more about what you're doing, get training? Because obviously you're offering that to PR agencies, teams, etc. How best to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so do drop me a line. I'm Harriet at AI4media.io, or you can go onto my website as harrietmeyer.com, where you can find out about my journalism as well. It's all sorts on there, and lots about AI for media. So do get in touch if you want to get up to speed and just to feel more confident with AI.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Really, really interesting. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks very much.